Ready.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for the last of our Legislative Lobby Week Lunch and Learn sessions. I am Gatel Sear. I'm the State Advocacy Chair. Penny Sharon, my comrade in arms, is actually traveling up to the Northern Arizona League, bringing the U.S. League CEO to meet some more of our members. So she unfortunately is not able to be on the call today. So I am flying solo with the help of Jody Liggett, who is our co-moderator. Jody, many of you know, is our state advocacy professional lobbyist and has a lot of experience on both behind the scenes and in front of the scenes at the legislature. And our panelists today are Rhonda Barnes, House Minority Deputy Chief of Staff, General Counsel, and Elizabeth Higgins, the Senate Minority General Counsel and Policy Advisor. Rhonda has been with us before. She is a friend, an old friend of the League's, and she has spoken with us on occasion before. So thank you for your repeat performance, and welcome, Elizabeth, to what I guess is your first and hopefully one of many engagements with League of Women Voters Arizona.
Thank you.
So just a couple of tips for today's session. I think you're all muted except for the speakers. At least that's what we were set up to do. We ask that you post your questions in the chat. Jody's going to monitor the chat. And we don't have a specific time to stop and let you ask questions. So just keep putting your questions in there. And at times that it seems like the best time to do it, we'll stop and get your questions answered for you. Very often we have sessions where we don't get to all the questions. And in those cases, we will, from the chat transcript, we will try to get the questions answered and we'll email them to everybody who registered for this session. There is our League of Women Voters Advocacy, azadvocacy@gmail.com email address if you have any questions for us or want to get involved if you're currently not involved with any of our advocacy efforts. And we are recording today's session. It will be on our YouTube channel. I think it might also be on our Facebook page. I'm not 100% sure about that. And for all of you who are subscribers to our weekly newsletter from the State Advocacy Committee, you will be getting links to all the programs this week. As I said, this is the fourth of the 4 programs. So all of them have been recorded. All of them will be available to you after the program. So I just want to give those of you who are not familiar with the League just a little bit of background. We will be 103 in, I think next week, the National League will be 103. And I think we look pretty good for our age. And we have been and are and have been a nonpartisan organization. That is our slogan. We are a nonpartisan organization. And that means we don't support or oppose candidates. We don't support or oppose political parties. Our concern are the issues. We advocate for or against issues that are of our priorities and of concern to our members and to the people of Arizona. All of our advocacy work and what we do quite a lot of in-depth legislative analysis of state bills. That's a big part of the work we do. All of it is driven by our public policy positions, which are well researched and vetted and discussed and voted on by our members. So many of us have interests in legislation for which we do not have a public policy. And we as individuals are, completely free to weigh in however we wish on those issues. But for the legal work, it has to be grounded in our public policy positions. We're statewide. The Arizona League is statewide, all volunteer, member-based. We have 5 local leagues and members at large, but within those 5 leagues and our members at large, we actually have a service area that encompasses 10 of the 15 Arizona counties, which is pretty impressive. So we do all the work that we do, our voter education and our advocacy work is spread out among all of our league members who live and work in those counties. So we have a fairly broad footprint in our state. I want to introduce our speakers, and I just popped their bios up here, and I'll read them, but you can read them. You can read along with me. So Rhonda Barnes, who I mentioned has been with us before, is General Counsel and Deputy Chief of Staff to the Democratic Caucus in the State House of Representatives. And I'm going to ask a question later on about caucuses, because our members ask about that, and it's a bit of a mystery to them what actually that is and what you do. She's been there since the fall of 2021, and she staffs the House Municipal Oversight and Elections Committee, which is where a lot of the bills that we're following are being heard, and the House Rules Committee. She focuses primarily on election legislation and the constitutionality of pending legislation. From 2005 to 2011, she was a litigation associate at Perkins Coie, where she worked on numerous election matters as well as general civil litigation. She clerked for Justice Rebecca Birch on the Arizona Supreme Court after graduating from ASU College of Law in 2004, and she has her undergraduate degree from the University of Arizona. Elizabeth Higgins graduated from ASU. I love all these homegrown, home-educated speakers. With an from ASU with a BA in political science and psychology. She first worked at the Arizona State Senate as an assistant to then Senator Harry Mitchell before going to ASU Law School. She worked then for Congressman Harry Mitchell as a senior district aide from 2007 to 2011. After joining a private practice, she returned to the government and worked with the city of Tempe, where she served as chief of staff to the mayor and council, and then assistant city attorney. She returned to the state senate in January of this year to serve as the Democratic Caucus general counsel and senior policy advisor for the Judiciary Committee, which we follow a lot of criminal justice legislation as well, and that is the committee typically where those bills are heard, in which those bills are heard. So I have just a few slides to set the stage, and then we're going to turn it over to our speakers. So I want to do just a quick overview, and people who know me say, good grief, this woman does this all the time. I just want to give a brief overview of the key steps in the legislative process. So for folks who are not as in the weeds as we are, who are working with this every day, have a sense of what we're talking about. And it will help, I think, set the stage for what our two speakers do. So bills are introduced. That's the first thing that happens, and they may be referred to a committee. Many bills are introduced and they never get referred to a committee. If they don't get referred to a committee, they are well and truly dead, at least for this year. The House Speaker and the Senate President decide if and to which committees a bill will be assigned. There are many ways they can kill a bill. They can not assign it to a committee. They can refer it to multiple committees or one without any reasonable jurisdiction, or they can hold a bill. The place where we as the league weigh in, and where you as members of the public have a place to have your voice heard, is when a bill is heard in committee. Not all bills will be heard. A bill can be referred to a committee, but there may never be a hearing on it. If it is heard and passed, it then goes to the Rules Committee, which does not discuss the merits of the bill. It's only concerned about constitutionality and proper form. So it is an important part of the process, but not one in which we as the public or we as league members can have much input or impact. If it, at that point, it is passed out of rules, it goes to the floor of whatever chamber it is, the House or the Senate. All members of that chamber discuss the bill and amendments on the floor. And if they vote in favor, the bill moves to the other chamber. And then the same steps are repeated in the other chamber. House bills go to the Senate, Senate bills go to the House. So it's a very, very high level, very brief overview of the major steps. And just to give you a little bit more context for the legislative landscape right now, we are in the today is the 10th of February. So the next big milestone for bills is going to be February 27th, which is the last day to hear bills in the committee of origin. So House hearings have to be done. Senate hearings have to be done by a week from today. That next week is what's known as crossover week, when bills are sent, House bills are sent to the Senate. If they've made it through the process, Senate bills are sent to the House. If all of this is done in 100 days, well, the official legislative calendar is 100 days. It often goes a lot longer than that. And typically a lot of that is budget negotiation, but that's the context of the work is done in a relatively short amount of time, unlike, for example, the U.S. Congress, which goes on with multiple recesses, but basically Congress folks work all year round. A little bit of the number of bills, because this informs the work that we're doing. There have been over 1,500 bills introduced, which I don't think is unusual, but it's a lot of bills. Only a third of those roughly are going to be enacted. The largest number of bills, and I just read this recently, has been in the area of education, which is not surprising. The second bucket is voting rights, also not surprising. And the third bucket is water. Again, these are big issues for Arizona. There are what I think are probably a large number of technical correction bills, which don't allegedly have any substantive changes in it, but they may be vehicles for some other workarounds for the deadlines by which bills have to be introduced. And maybe we could talk about that later. Maybe Elizabeth and Rhonda can talk a little bit about strikers. The League is currently following 150 voting rights bills. That is a lot of voting rights bills. 36 of them are going to be heard this upcoming week, some of them in the Senate Elections Committee and some of them in the House Municipal Oversight and Elections Committee. So that gives you a little bit of the scope of the work that we're doing. And another, we have gotten a lot of questions from our members and from the public about, well, there's all these bills. There are a lot of bills I care greatly about. I don't know a lot about them, but I want to do something. So what can I do? So one of the systems that Arizona has, which makes it, if not unique in the country, unusual in the country, is that you as an individual have the ability to register your opposition or support for a bill online. So the Arizona legislators know how you feel about a particular piece of legislation. You can comment on that bill. You can choose to speak at a committee hearing if you wish. You are not required to, of course, but it is one way that our legislators get the message that there are people who care about, real people who care about these bills. One of the things that I think is really important to know is you don't have to be a registered Arizona voter to use the request to speak system. You can, I'm registered in another state because I'm a part-time resident. I use RTS here. If you have high school students who are not old enough to vote yet, but they care about particular issues that affect them, education or just, you know, any issue that is of interest to them, this is a very good way to get them interested in registering to vote and voting, to see how much impact they can have by the power of their vote. So there's a lot of things to talk about RTS, and that's not what this is about. But I do want you to know that the League is, you do need to be registered at the Capitol to have an RTS account so that you can use RTS. And the League has volunteers who are doing that for League members and for non-League members. So if you would like to get an RTS account and you do not have one, I'm going to put this in the chat so that you have this URL. You just have to fill out this form, and it's a very brief form, and we will take care of it for you. So let me just do that. I remember. So this is there we go. So anybody who wants to get a RTS account can do that. Okay, that's be done. I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth and Rhonda. Since you're in the same room, why don't you decide amongst yourselves, between yourselves, who would like to go first and talk about your role in the legislature, what you do and how what you do impacts legislation. You're on.
Great. Yeah, thank you. We decided to do this together because I was having technical problems, so I hope it works out. You all can hear me, yeah? I'm Rhonda Barnes. As was stated, I am the General Counsel and Deputy Chief of Staff to the House Democratic Caucus. I've been there 12 years. Well, this is my 12th session. And in all those 12 years, I've been General Counsel and staffed wherever election bills went. So some years the committees change depending on the speaker. So some years we have, like this year, an elections committee. It's municipal oversight and elections, although we've had no municipal oversight bills. It's all been elections, but sometimes it's in judiciary, sometimes it's in government. So I kind of float around wherever that policy is. And I do that primarily because I used to be an election litigator. So when I was at Perkins Coie for several years, I represented the Democratic Party, Democratic candidates, initiatives. I worked on recalls. I did all that kind of stuff in court on election matters. So that's always been my area of focus. And then the other committee I staff, which Elizabeth does over here in the Senate, is rules. And in Arizona, the rules committee is a required step in the process. So every bill that gets out of its substantive committee, whether it's judiciary, elections, whatever, has to go to rules before it can go to the floor. And in rules, we don't look at the policy, which you guys just learned about. We just look at the constitutionality. So if we're going to impose these regulations, are they federally preempted? Is this going to infringe on First Amendment rights? Is there federal regulation on, like we get a lot of environmental bills that are federally preempted, right? Wolves and water and things like that. So we kind of look at all of those issues. So Elizabeth and I read every bill that gets out of committee to come to rules, which is kind of fun because actually after 12 years, I know a little bit about everything, enough to be dangerous. And it's kind of fun year over year because I remember some stuff. It's like, oh, we had this bill last time, right? So I just stepped out of our staff meeting for the House policy, Democratic policy staff. And a lot of it is going over the bills that are coming up. So next week is the last week to hear House bills in the House, except for appropriations, which has one more. We call it garbage can appropriations because they'll throw whatever they need to into it, whatever didn't get in. That'll be the 20th, I think is the date. So we spent a fair amount of time in our staff meeting going through the controversial bills. And so year over year, I see the same stuff in different iterations that come through. So it's kind of a lot of what we do is just track it. And since we're in the minority, we never really know what's coming, right? The majority sets the agenda. The majority, the speaker, sets what's going to go to the floor. And so a lot of what we're doing is playing defense in the minority caucus. Oh, and you asked, people wanted to know what caucus was. Is that right?
Yeah.
So caucus, because we're weird, has two meanings in the legislature, right? There is the caucus, which is the sort of party breakdown of the members. So we're in the minority caucus or the Democratic caucus, which is just all the members in the House or the Senate who are Democrats. But then caucus is also a thing we do Tuesday mornings. And so when we use it in that context, it's when the policy advisors meet with all of the members in the caucus, so mine would be the Democrats, and we go through the bills that are coming up in the next week. So this is a weird session. We've only done one bill in caucus. Well, we kind of did the budget, but the budget staff presents that. So usually by this time we've had a couple hundred bills probably that have gone to caucus, and so if you're a member of the education committee you might not have heard anything about what the judiciary bills are. So our caucus meetings on Tuesday morning are a chance for people who don't know anything about those judiciary bills to hear from the policy advisor about what passed, so that those bills that are moving, when they go to the floor, all the members in the caucus have had a chance to at least hear something about every bill that's coming up. And so they get an agenda with all the bills and who's going to be advising them on it. And then our staff also prepares our summary, which we call a caucus sheet. So the members will have sort of what the vote was and what the bill does. And then in the House side, I don't know about the Senate side, sorry, we do include a little synopsis from RTS that you were talking about. It's interesting, over the several years I've been here, RTS was this sort of quaint process, right? That you used to fill out a piece of paper to say you were going to be there, and then it became online, but then you had to register in person, so it wasn't that many. And I can tell you now, there's 300-400 people that will log in on RTS to have a bill position. And unique to this year, and at least for me, it's unique, there's fake names on there now. I had Tinkerbell, I had Colonel Coconuts. So we have decided in the House Democratic staff, at least, that we're not going to list all the names, because honestly, I don't know if they're real, right? So we will provide to the members everybody who testified in person, every organization that registered. So if Jody doesn't testify in person, and I call it MO, Municipal Oversight and Elections, MO, but her organization, if the league signs in, my members will know that. So when I go to caucus Tuesday morning and say, members, HB blah, blah, blah does this, and the organization signed in opposed, usually the league is opposed, they'll be on there on that sheet. So they'll know your organization's position. But we won't have Colonel Coconuts and Tinkerbell listed on there anymore. It's become a thing. But I will have a bill, the summary might be this long, and there could be 12 pages of names of people who signed in. So all of that information and the comments can be provided to members. They just have to get onto RTS, or their staff can provide it. And I know there's some organizations that like RTS because it's sort of directly related to the bill. And I can tell you, for my members, sometimes they get hundreds or thousands of emails a day. And so those can get lost. And sometimes RTS is a nice way for them to just say, this bill's coming up, what are the comments on it? And they can pull it all together. So it can be good and bad, how you want to try to communicate with members, because they definitely can get overwhelmed. So I've kind of lost track of where I was going with talking about caucus and what I do. Did you have a question? Did I see a hand?
Yeah, I have a question. On to that point, when you're briefing the caucus, I know you have, the testimony and RTS, and the league has been working to go to the next level of sophistication and getting staff and members things that they need, which is a total work in progress. We don't have it down yet. But it would be helpful for you to have our testimony letters as staff, if you have to explain a bill. I'm trying to think of what are the most useful things we could get you. I have a bias. I'm former staff too, right? It just, whatever. I loved the people who made my job easier. And if I could trust them, I would use their stuff. So we want to be that entity for you, that is providing you all the things that make your jobs easier, because we know how closely you work with the members who are definitely our friends. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I think the getting the information and testimony ahead of committee is usually the most helpful. In the Democratic staff, we brief our members before committee, because again, they're not our bills, right? They're not hearing our bills, and we don't know what's coming. So we do what we call a pre-committee briefing before committee, usually a couple days beforehand. So if folks wanted to reach out and get information to the members, the best time to do it would be before committee, so that then they can ask a question in committee, or they can, if somebody's there in the audience, we can have you come up and talk or something like that. Generally, by the time we get to caucus, all that sort of aired publicly, and caucus is really just the time to let members know this is what the bill does, and if they want to know what the testimony was in committee. So I know, you guys are tracking, what did you say, 30-something bills next week? It's crazy. But anything that you can get, and if you get it to me, then I get it to the members of the committee, right? Like
Right.
if it's something that all of my I staff the 4 Democrats on Mo, I can get it to them directly, easily. So you're not trying to go around emails and other things like that. Yeah. Do you want to talk
Thank
about
you.
this?
Sure.
Okay.
So I'll just tell a little bit about myself from the start. So many years ago, I started as my first job here at the State Senate, working for Senator Harry Mitchell at the time. And so I kind of learned the process early from then. And it's many years later now. And now I come back and it's like 18 years later since I left. But the carpet's still the same. So, it's not that bad. But in that role as an assistant, I didn't have the type of responsibility that I have now. So I'm hoping that it gets a little easier. And yes, because I'm trying to read through all of these bills, which some of them, if they've been coming back again and again, I kind of like go to Google, look up and see what's the bill that is coming back from last session or many sessions ago, to kind of get a backstory there. But on some of them, I'm trying to guess, or trying to figure out where they're coming from, and sometimes what their effect will be, to see, because sometimes things are written in a way where they could be 1 or 2 meanings, and you kind of have to figure out what's the real intention here of this bill. So been trying to keep my head above water with all of that stuff. So now I do, yes, judiciary and rules, and both of those publish on Friday afternoons. So I have lovely busy weekends of trying to figure out both of those things so that I can prep our members, because rules is on Monday before floor, and then caucus is Tuesday morning, and usually a bill will go to rules before it goes to caucus, which is also a good thing for us, because then we've heard all of those bills, we've been looking through them because they've gone to rules and then they're going to caucus, and so to know what's coming before the caucus and be able to share those legal issues that come up on those bills as they go through rules. And then Tuesday afternoons, I have our Jude briefing. So trying to also then take the 3 Democrats that are on that committee and get them up to speed. 2 of them, no, 1 of them is brand new to the legislature, but all 3 of them are brand new to the committee. So we're trying to find our way through all of those issues. So we're doing it together, and it's funny because it's all women. It's me, 3 female legislators, and then my intern is a female student too. So we're kind of like our own little group that we get together in one of our offices, try to figure out these things. So that's really, it's been fun. It's a lot of work. So anything that is sent our way, I appreciate that. Like any legal issues that are being brought forward, because obviously when you have your own committee you're working with, I try to watch and listen to with one ear sometimes other committees that are going on, and as if I'm hearing bills that they're talking about, I'll go in and I'll make notes on the bill. But otherwise I'm kind of having to go back through and read them and see exactly what the initial or deeper legal issues could be. So that's kind of what we do. I don't know if there's any questions about, I think Rhonda gave a pretty good synopsis.
Oh, I see. I have a question, but Jody has her hand raised in the appropriate way, so we'll let Jody ask
For once. So I'm curious, and I think our listeners would be curious too, to know just, right, your partisan staff, so you're most acquainted with your members, but you're there every day. Like, I'm curious, just what do you think the freshmen are thinking? Like on the conservative side, you've got this onslaught of bills. So, we can speculate, like there's the whole backdrop of the last election that we're still dealing with, right? I think we know some of what's going on here, but I'm wondering, like, do you think there's some true believer? True believer is the wrong word. Like, sincere good government people who may be confused and pushing bad policy? Do you think it's all political? What do your members who are brand new think about? Like, are they overwhelmed? What could they use? You know, even not necessarily just in our issue area, but what would members like from interest groups, from civic organizations who want, you know, them to just do the best job they can, whether it's on our bills or anything else? Like, can you, I know you're not a member yourself, but there's so much care and feeding. I feel like you know what they need.
Yeah, you want me to start?
Sure.
This is a huge freshman class. You know, I have a majority freshman. You have true freshmen. I mean, the Senate, I always say we train up the House members and then they leave us and go to the Senate. So, you know, so often the Senate is composed of former House members, but Elizabeth has like true freshmen this year. They actually did freshman orientation for them, which in all the years I've been here, they've never done because they never needed it. So I think, I mean, our freshmen, and it's true for both sides. There's a 34, I think, in the House. So, you know, there's truly a majority freshman in the chamber. And so I think they are quite overwhelmed. But, you know, I have to say and I'm biased, I know, but my caucus, they're really a great group. A lot of folks, I think, who are in office right now and running right now are really inspired by what they're seeing at the national level. You know, I've got some members who sort of, I don't know what's the phrase, cut their teeth on SB 1070, right? Like they're young, 30-ish, I consider that young. And they sort of started because SB 1070 was an attack on their communities, right? And so we've got quite a few organizers, activists in both caucuses who are really excited to be here. I have freshmen who know all about the process because they've come down and testified on bills, or they tracked it for whatever organization they work for. So that's really good. But I also have some who have no idea. They just, you know, bless their heart, stepped in and they're just drinking from a fire hose is the phrase we use. So it is definitely overwhelming. You know, as far as what I think they could use from outside organizations, I think it's quite frankly just giving them courage, right? Tweet at them. I don't do Instagram or other stuff, but you know, if they know that there are people out there who are supporting them and have their back and appreciate their voice, they really need to hear that, because the voice they hear in committee and everywhere else is really the conspiracy theory, the big lies, the election deniers. That's just every day. And so I know they would appreciate hearing from every ordinary folks and people active in the league and others who are saying you're doing the right thing. It was a big lie. We really need you to be protecting our democracy. Thank you for standing up to them. I know that would mean a lot to them to have that voice there, because it's so easy to hear the hysteria and it's really hard to hear the quiet, sane voices. You know, and Jody, one of your questions too was about like, where do people land? Are they really believing in good government, but they're sort of disillusioned or not? And I honestly think it's a combination. And you can't say that one group totally is the grifters and that's all there is. There are really truly people who have been taken advantage of by these lies. And then there's some people who really believe them. So I really do think it's a combination of that. And, you know, there may be people who will never be able to educate, you know, no amount of evidence is going to convince them that people actually wanted to vote for Joe Biden, right? I've heard legislators say this. Well, I don't know anybody who voted for him, so he couldn't have won. You know, and it's like, well, I mean, you're talking to me, like, you know. So I think they just they cannot believe something. It is I don't know, hardwired in them, and those people we're never going to persuade. But you know, I think some people, when they're presented with evidence, will figure it out. I think our county recorder here in Maricopa County is a Republican. The Republican Board of Supervisors, right? They all figured it out. They saw it. They understand the truth. So more of those voices out there, I think, is really important, and not letting them get drowned out by the big lie. Yeah. Anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that. I know one of my members of Jude, she was a community organizer, and she's coming in with a real excitement about, you know, being in this role and having this opportunity. And you know, she'll be like, I can't wait to read that bill, and I can't wait to, you know, kind of try to figure it out. And people are contacting me about this, and so she gets really excited to hear about how things affect actual people in the community, and you know what those unintended consequences could be. Because that's what she's seen in her community about how a lot of laws are, how they affect those folks that she sees every day. So those are really important things to her. But I agree, yeah, just having that support from folks, because we do go to these committees and sometimes you just you shake your head and your eyes get big by some of the things that you hear, especially not even necessarily from the senators themselves, or the reps themselves, but from the public comment that comes in too. And so I think you kind of almost get yourself into a vacuum of the information that's coming at you, and it can be a little bit, you can feel a little sad about the state of things, but you kind of have to think, this is not everybody out there. These are folks that are really engaged on one half or the other. And I think that encouragement, I think, is a great idea.
Yeah, I definitely think there's an echo chamber.
Yeah.
Right. That people aren't necessarily getting everything they, it's reinforcing what they already believe. And so broadening the voices that are loud out there, I think is beneficial to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. When I worked for Harry, he would always, his one big thing when a lobbyist or someone would come in to speak to him about a bill, he'd say, well, I've heard your side now. Tell me what the person on the other side of this issue is also going to say to me. And he would kind of gauge, how a person, how honest they were for one, and then how forthcoming that they were with that type of conversation. So that was really helpful for him. But yeah.
I was struck by something you said, Elizabeth, about encouraging people to encourage the minority legislators that, that they're doing the right thing, they're doing a good thing, without actually going and testifying, because we find that people are a little reluctant to go testify, as individuals. And I think the environment now in some of the committees is a little fraught, and I think that may put people off also. So, and we on the league, Jody and our volunteer lobbyists testify and also submit written testimony. Is that something that you would encourage members of the public to do who don't? Because the comment on RTS is like 250 characters. You can't get a whole lot of comment in there. If I, as a member of the public, felt strongly about a bill, speaking on my own behalf, not as a member of the league, and didn't want to testify, but wanted to contact all the committee members, including the minority committee members, should I just go ahead and do that? Should I just say, it's not really a testimony, but I cared greatly about this bill, and this is why? Is this something that's appropriate to do? Is something we should encourage our members to do?
I think so, yes. I mean, especially having worked for a city, we had a lot of legislative alerts that we would put out to people that had signed up for lists. And because I think there is a bit of an echo chamber vacuum here. Sometimes if you're, especially I know it was a long time ago when I worked here and email was somewhat new, but they didn't get, Harry Mitchell didn't get a lot of emails one way or another on bills. And I feel like if there is an issue, sometimes if they're like, well, I'm not hearing from anybody on it, then they don't know the impact that that's going to have on a person or their city or their community or any a group that they affiliate with. So I think it's super helpful. I mean, even if they are not reading and responding to everyone, they are reading that subject line that comes in. They're knowing that people are following what they're doing, which I think is important, because when you think that no one's watching, that's when you try to get away with whatever you can get away with. So.
And I think too, I know I'm on staff and so I'm biased, but each caucus has policy staff, and I work very closely with the folks on my committees. And so if you want to make sure that it's getting to the right people and they're going to see it, loop in staff, right? You can call the House and ask to speak to the Democratic office and they'll get you in touch with us. I could give you my contact information, but yeah, I think that's a way to make sure that it's getting there. And I've definitely seen members on the floor read letters from constituents. So, if one of my members is your legislator and you have a story to tell and you share that with them, they may read it on the floor. I'm voting no on this bill because, you know, Mary Beth said blah, 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 and she reached out to me and this is important. Like, I definitely hear that. And that voice is super important to our caucus. And even if folks don't want to testify, if they've got the time and want to come down to committee, you know, we see in Mo, it's the 1 day, 1 vote t-shirts every day. You know, and also the Red for Ed is a great example of people who came and organized. They were all wearing their red shirts and they filled the gallery and they filled the committee rooms. And so you don't have to go up to the podium and be interrogated, because I get that. That's intimidating. I would not enjoy it. But your presence there, you can have a message in other ways to have your voice heard. So I think all of those are really great options to be engaged in the process.
And emailing the person that you agree with and emailing the person that you don't agree with. I mean, I think it's important for them to know there are 2 sides to these issues and they need to hear the other side too.
I suppose we haven't really seen in recent memory a room full of League of Women Voters t-shirts, for example. Right? That would be different for us and something that we could do when it's called for.
For sure. You know, and I'll tell you, there's an internal struggle we're having right now in this election policy, because they want to require only hand counting and throw out the machines, and they want to have only in-person voting in the polling place with the results that day. Like, that is the language that's being suggested. And I know our folks are really struggling with how much to engage with that. Not only do we expect Governor Hobbs to veto it, so it's not as scary as it might have been a couple of years ago, but it's just completely unimplementable, right? Our county elections folks have said, we can't do this. There's just absolutely no way. And so it's really a struggle of how much do we push back and point out all of the difficulties. It is impossible to hand count 2 million votes in Maricopa County with 90 things on the ballot. It's truly impossible. And do we point that out over and over again every week? You know, it's a crazy new world. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I do know that the voice of moderation and practicality is too quiet right now, and we would love to have more engagement.
Yeah, right. And so our members could understand that some of this is useful for the present moment, but it's also giving our governor, who we like and is our friend, you know, she doesn't need cover to veto ridiculous bills. But to the degree, I just think it's appreciated, just like members appreciate it. And yeah, she needs a certain kind of cover. I mean, it needs to look like what it is, which is she's vetoing something that makes absolutely no sense. And, you know, these X hundred people and organizations in the community also think it doesn't make any common sense.
Right. It may be my litigation background, but I like to say we're making a record, right? You're making a record. We're saying what's wrong with it. We're pointing it out. And, you know, as much as I admire greatly the recorders and the elections officials, they really are the only voice sometimes in the room saying, wait a minute, we can't do this. So yeah, having that engagement. And I think it's powerful having the gallery, right? Like, if the house floor is on the 2nd floor and the gallery is on the 3rd, and it looks down like a mezzanine, right? If there is a solid half of it that's wearing League t-shirts or whatever color you want to pick, like, I do think it's powerful, and it gives the members sort of comfort, and they're proud. And, you know, if you come down and you meet with your members, they'll introduce you on the floor, so you'll be in the permanent record, which I think is really cool. You know, you'll get your name entered, they'll tell something about it, everybody will clap for you. It's really, I mean, I love the legislature. I'm very biased, but I think it's really cool. You know, come down, meet your member, say something. And even if you don't get much time with them, you know, you can be part of the process, even without having to have that sort of direct engagement.
We do have 2 questions from members, from our members, or from our attendees, that I want to ask you. The first one is, can a bill be heard in Cal without going through a committee? In other words, snuck in without being available to RTS, is the way the question was phrased.
Yeah, the only way a bill can come to the floor without going to committee is if they suspend the rule. So the rules require them to go to committee. We say in the House, 31 votes get you whatever you want, basically. So they could. Honestly, the only time we've ever really tried to do that is to go around the speaker. So if you remember on the ballot last year, there was tuition for DACA kids. That was one of the measures that voters approved. That went around the speaker. I can't remember if it went to committee or not, but I know that they went around Speaker Bowers and took that immediately to a floor vote without his permission. And they did that by suspending the rules. But I mean, that's like one example out of hundreds and hundreds. So it is exceedingly rare. They go to committee. We have a mantra. It's rules, caucus, cow, right? It's got to go to rules before it goes to caucus. It's got to go to caucus before it goes to cow. And rules, caucus, cow is what I say all the time.
Yeah, in the Senate, the AEL did just go to rules. It never went to election, or not election, education, but it did go to rules and was heard in rules, and then was caucus and third read.
Thank you. The other question is, do the committee chairs have absolute discretion whether or not to hear a bill in their committee?
As long as it's assigned to their committee, they do. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, we hear all the time that the speaker is very proud of himself for assigning Democratic bills to committee, but they don't have to hear it just because it's assigned there. In the House, which is different from the Senate, if a bill is double assigned, it has to get out of the first committee before it can go to the second. So a lot of our, like if you think about a road appropriation, a lot of times it'll go to transportation and then appropriations. So the appropriations chair can't hear it unless it's gotten out of transportation. Those rules actually go back and forth every 2 to 4 years. They get repealed and then reinstated in the House, but the Senate doesn't do that, I don't think.
I think they're trying to do that as an informal process, maybe with the chairs, but I don't know that it's been. I mean, we have amended the rules several times now in the Senate because of our Senate president. He apparently likes to just change the rules when he wants to. So yeah, we've gone through 2 iterations of rule changes. I think there could obviously be more. And the Senate has a way to discharge a bill if it's not being heard. But it takes 2/3, I think, or no, 3/5.
Ours is 3/5, yeah.
Yeah, it takes 3/5 of signatures from senators to basically sign to try to get it out of that wherever it's stuck. And it would cause the Senate president to bring it to the floor eventually, but I've never seen that happen.
Yeah, when I've seen it started in the House, usually by the time majority members get wind of it, they say, fine, hear your bill, right? They don't actually want the petition filed, they just do it.
Yeah.
Jody has her hand up.
Oh, I just wanted, this is all so very reinforcing. But I do think if you would repeat, I think it's so hard for normal people, right? Civilians to wrap their head around some of these things that the chairman or woman has absolute discretion. They don't have to hear any bills. I mean, you know, there would be a conversation probably, but right, like they don't have to do anything. And if they want to only hear Republican bills, they can do that. They'll be criticized, they'll, you know, all sorts of other stuff, but it's not illegal to do that. They have that much discretion.
Well, and the speaker has discretion to create committees, to put members on the committees, to have the, you know, right now there's a 1 or 2 vote advantage on every committee for Republicans. But if they wanted to have a 3 vote advantage and have all of their members on 5 committees so they can kill everything, they absolutely have that discretion. And they do, you know, and our members will point out they have a 1 vote majority in both chambers.
Yeah.
I flip 1 seat in the next election and we're tied. You know, it's not that big of a majority caucus. And so for them to say, well, we want to have 3 more people on a committee than you and never hear any of your bills, in my opinion, silence is, you know, the 49% of the population that participated and sent folks here. So, and I can tell you, it's always a struggle, always a struggle here. You know, the Democrats have been in the minority since the 1960s. And so, and then the House never had parity like they have had in the Senate. And so it's some of it is momentum that's just carried them through all these years. But yes, to your point, the chair can pick whatever bills he or she wants to have. And as they've been doing in the Senate often, also have presentations that are completely one-sided, you know. And so that information is presented without any countervailing response. We are trying to fix that in the House. I can tell you I have reached out to county elections because our chairwoman Parker did say, if you want to have a response, you can invite them. So I'm working on getting them out there, but she can again, just say, no, thank you.
Right.
It's for sure. And the other thing I don't think normal people know is that they limit testimony, right? So you get 1, maybe 2 minutes to present on the bill. So everything you want to say about how this would impact your grandma who immigrated from Austria, you get 1 minute.
Yeah, you
Right.
better say it quick.
You've got to say it.
That you drove down from
Yes.
Mojave to do, and they might not even call you. Can you, I'm so sorry for jumping in, but talk again about limiting testimony and this, thing of, it's not new at all, but like, okay, 3 and 3, figure it out amongst yourselves,
yeah.
right? So advocates who may not even work with or agree with one another have to sort through and figure out which 3 of them are going to be against or for. Can you say a little bit more and help folks on the call understand what the heck is going on with that?
Yeah, luckily my committee has not done that. Judy he limits the committee testimony to 2 minutes usually, unless time is getting short, then he might shorten it even more to 1 minute. But he hasn't done that whole thing where, figure it out amongst yourselves. I know that I've watched elections for several reasons in watching it, and that's a tactic that chair takes. And she will say, here we're going to hear this bill, you people stand up, figure it out, and then she'll take 3 people from each side and she'll give them each 2 minutes. So I mean, yeah, it's kind of sad. It's like, how can you really relay how a bill is going to impact an entire state in 2 minutes or 6 minutes if there's 3 of you testifying? So that's why also just providing that background and that email or that tweet or whatever it is to communicate to your member or the members of the committee is important. And yeah, it does. I feel like it does hurt the process, and it does hurt the public's view of how laws are made. I mean, everyone says it's it's the sausage being made that we love, and I'm like, hey, I'm a vegetarian. Let's call it something else now. But it does. Yes, the soy riso being made. But it's yeah, it does definitely impact, and because I think a person could come down here with a very good heart and be thinking that they're going to testify and that they're going to be sharing a story that is maybe very personal to them. And they're told, you've got a minute, go. And then the bell, if someone's cell phone dings, and then they say, 10 seconds, 5 seconds.
In the middle of your testimony.
Yeah, 1 second, you're done. And it's a little harsh at times, I think.
And it is harsh, and I do think it's quite undemocratic, but I would say that if somebody does want to come down, I don't want to discourage anybody who does want to. If you do and you can, reach out and let us know you're going to be there. And if you have questions you want to have asked of you, we can orchestrate it, right? Like, there's so much that's done behind the scenes to make it run a little more smoothly. So if you've got really compelling testimony about how a bill is going to disenfranchise your family and you want to come down and testify, get in touch with me, get in touch with the ranking member, let us know what you're going to say, and then we can work on questions so that so you can talk longer. So when the bell rings at 1 minute and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm done and I have these 10 things to say, I've got members teed up to say, oh, I understand, blah, blah, blah. Whatever the question is, we can script it. Sounds more fancy than it is, but we're kind of put it together. And we do that for everything. Like, I know sometimes people come in and you watch committee or you watch floor and it seems weird, but sometimes they're asking questions of each other, not so much for each other, or they're asking a question they know the answer to put it out there in the public. So it's not always happenstance that in caucus or committee or floor, it's going that way. It can be for a particular reason. So, I think legislative staff in particular is here to make it function. As I like to say, we keep the wheels moving right on here. And it's not for me to get involved in the fight with the members. What they disagree on is up to them. But, to make sure committee is running, to make sure the rules are followed, to make sure voices are heard. That's quite literally what I do every day. So
help set the record.
To set the record and have the voices heard. And, being in the minority, the only thing we can do is really try to make them follow the rules. And so that's what we do.
Yeah.
I have, we're almost at time. I have two more questions from our attendees. The first one is, why are mirror bills introduced when bills have to go through both chambers anyway? What is the point of having the same bills introduced in both chambers?
So if they're introduced in both chambers and they're moving along and they either are just amended the same or the language stays the same, then once they are both passed, they can kind of just be switched out on each side and sent up to the governor. So it's a big time saver. They did it with the AEL. They passed it first out of the House, then it came over, and then they switched it and sent it back to the House. So it does save a lot of time and energy, which can be a good thing for a good bill or a very bad thing for a bad bill. So that's why they do that.
Okay, yeah, thank you. The other question, and I think we may have to make this the last one. If the governor vetoes a bill, will the Republicans make an attempt to override it, or is their majority too narrow? Well, how could they? Well,
The majority is too narrow. That's right. It's 2/3, I think, to
Yeah.
override a veto. And so they just, in order to override it, they'd have to get Democrats on board. And I've never seen a bill a veto overridden in the years I've been here.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. Well, I think I don't see any more questions in the chat, and we are just about at time. I hope this was useful for our registrants. I found it incredibly valuable. Thank you so much, ladies, and all ladies, including Jody. It was a great program. Thanks again, and we really appreciate all that you're doing. I think it's important for people to know what goes on behind the scenes and the value that you bring to the process, and you're not in the public eye like the legislators, which is probably a good thing. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you for
We really
inviting us.
appreciate
Yes,
it.
thank you.
Absolutely. Okay.
Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.